People of Redemption, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I do encourage you, go ahead and share this video because it's going to be immensely hopeful as we look at journeying through difficult times and standing resilient. Hey, I am so excited because next week I won't be doing this. I won't be preaching to a camera solely. Why? Because we're going to have our first in-person services right here on our campus. I encourage you to join us at 9:30 or 11 o'clock next week for our in-person services. We will have safety measures in place to ensure the safety of you and your family. And if you cannot join us, I encourage you, go ahead, stay at home. We will stream the services live. We love you, and we can't wait to see you if you cannot join us next week. So we are in the final installment of this message series right here, Resilient. And we're going through the life of Joseph. And if there's anyone that knows about hardship, it's clearly Joseph. Joseph, he's been betrayed by his brothers. He's been sent away to a foreign land to live. He has been a slave. He's been falsely accused. He has been in prison. He has been forgotten. I mean, this guy has went through so much, and yet he stands resilient. He stands strong in the midst of difficult times. And how does he do it? Well, it's teaching us how to stand strong. There's a few things that we need to see. To stand strong, we need the good judgment of God. We need to trust that God will make all things right, that we don't need to exact or seek revenge. We simply lay every hurt and every wound at his feet, and we know that he's going to take care of it. Second, we need the presence of God. So Jesus, he died for us, sends us the Holy Spirit to live with us, so you and I never have to go through hardship alone. We need the empowerment of God. We need the empowerment of the Holy Spirit to help us get through difficult times. And finally, we need the wisdom of God to navigate the difficulties of life. But there's one more lesson in here from Joseph's life that we need to examine. See, Joseph at this point, he is made second in command throughout all of Egypt. I mean, Joseph is literally only under Pharaoh himself, and he is overseeing all the plans, all the cities, all the food distribution. Now, why food distribution? Well, Egypt has went through 7 good years. 7 years of plenty where they had so many crops, and then God revealed to Joseph that there would be 7 difficult years. And so they're in year 2 of the famine. So Joseph is now overseeing all the efforts to distribute food. And the Bible literally says the world was coming to Egypt. Why? Well, Joseph, he was so wise that he helped Egypt navigate this difficult season, this famine. And he was also helping the entire world. Well, sure enough, the most unlikely of visitors will show up at his doorstep. So let us read. When Jacob, now that's Joseph's father, learned that there was grain for sale in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you look at one another?" And he said, "Behold, I have heard that there is grain for sale in Egypt. Go down and buy grain for us there, that we may live and not die." So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. But Joseph did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with his brothers, for he feared that harm might happen to him. Thus the sons of Israel came to buy among the others who came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. And now Joseph was governor over all the land. He was the one who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. Joseph, he was just 17 years old, a teenager, when he was sold by his brothers into slavery. 17 years old, and he was betrayed in the worst of ways by his own kin, his brothers. And now 22 years have passed. He's no longer the 17-year-old boy. No, he is a 39-year-old man, and he is ruling and reigning in Egypt. Now, Jacob, his father, Joseph's father, he hears that there's grain in the land. And so he sends 10 of the brothers. Joseph actually has 11 brothers, but only 10 of them go. The father's fearful that the youngest, Benjamin, he would get hurt or something would happen to him, so he kept him back. He sends 10 of his brothers to go get grain in Egypt. And there they are, bowing themselves before the brother that they had betrayed. unknowingly. They had no idea that this was Joseph. Now, there's some back and forth that happens. Joseph recognizes them, even though they don't recognize Joseph. He recognizes that this is my brothers, the ones that have sold me into slavery. Here they are. And so there's some back and forth, and he ends up sending them back, and they still don't know it's Joseph. And he says, I want you to bring back your 11th brother. The brother that's not here, I want you to bring him back. And so there they are, 11 brothers standing before Joseph. Now, here's a question. If you had been hurt to such a degree that Joseph has been hurt, how would you treat these brothers? See, the tables have turned. See, they were in power. At 17 years old, they were in power, and they betrayed him and sold him off. But now he has the power. He has the control to do whatever he likes to those 11 brothers. So what is Joseph going to do to his brothers? What he will do and the compassion that he shows will again teach us how do you and I stand resilient during hard times. So continue to worship with us and stay tuned for part 2 of this message. Well, welcome back to part 2 of this message. As we've seen, Joseph is a guy that's went through a lot of hardship in his life. And kind of this final chapter or examination of his life, his brothers who have betrayed him 22 years prior, when he was just 17 years old, now stand before him. He is in charge over all of Egypt. They are seeking grain. They're seeking food. There's a famine in the land. Their family needs to eat. And so they find themselves in front of Joseph. But here's the thing. They have no idea that it's Joseph. But Joseph recognizes his brothers. So Joseph knows that it is his brothers that are standing right before him, and they're bowing before him. They're seeking food so that they can live and sustain and survive. But they have no clue that that is Joseph, who is ruling in Egypt right now. So what's going to happen as they stand before him? It says this in Genesis 45. Then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood before him. He cried, "Make everyone go out from me." So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept aloud so that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. So Joseph, he reveals himself to his brothers. He's like, it's me, it's Joseph. It's the one that you sold into slavery 22 years ago. I was just 17, it's me. Of course, they're not going to know what to do, but he begins to sob. He begins to cry. And the cry of Joseph is so loud that even like Pharaoh's house heard it. Basically, this is showing just how great his weeping was, how much he was crying over this. I want to encourage you in this way, to stand resilient. I think one of the things that's often overlooked is the grieving and the healing process. If you've been hurt by someone, if you've been betrayed by someone, I want to encourage you right now, give yourself space, give yourself freedom to mourn that, to weep over that, to express your hurt in a really physical way. I think this is part of the process in which we heal. Joseph, he lets it all out. I mean, the floodgates are open and he cries and weeps, and even Pharaoh's house hears it. It's part of his healing process. So let me just encourage you, it's okay to weep. Jesus himself wept during a difficult moment in his life. You and I can weep, we can cry, we can shed tears over the difficulties of life. Now it continues on. And Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. So Joseph said to his brothers, "Come near to me, please." And they came near, and he said, "I am your brother, Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt." Now just pause here for a moment. I mean, they are anxious, fearful, dismayed at knowing that this is their brother that they had sold. I mean, they were literally bowing down to him. He has complete power and control. So they're like, what is he going to do? We sold him as a slave. I mean, we kind of left him for dead in a pit, and then we sold him. What is he going to do to us? He has complete power and control in this situation. Again, to stand resilient, You and I do not need to exact or seek revenge against those that have hurt us. That's not what Joseph is going to do. As a matter of fact, it will only make the situation and your heart worse. The root of bitterness will only grow deeper into your heart if that is what you are seeking, revenge. Nope, that's not what he's going to do. Here's what he does. He says, and now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are yet 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to keep alive for you many survivors. Man, I love this. Joseph, he recognizes the sovereignty of God in his life. He goes, guys, I know that you're dismayed right now. Don't be angry with yourself. I'm releasing you from that. Don't be dismayed right now, because I recognize that in my life, even through the bad parts of my life, that God is sovereign over all. A few chapters later in Genesis 50, he will articulate and interpret this thought even more. He says to his brothers, as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. Again, he recognizes God's hand in all of it. And really, this passage is kind of an Old Testament version of Romans 8:28. Romans 8:28 is a fairly popular verse in our Christian culture. It's a verse that many cling to during times of difficulty, and this is what it says. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. Paul, he's writing this to the church in Rome in this particular passage. And he goes, I want to let you know that God, he works all things out, not just the good parts of life, but even the bad parts, the difficult parts, the tough parts. He works it all out for good, for your good and for his glory. Do you see how both Paul and Joseph are on the same page? They recognize that no matter what, God is ruling and reigning in their life. That even in the difficult moments of life, even when it feels like God has abandoned us, that maybe he's not in control any longer, they recognize, no, he is with us and he is still in control. Joseph, he was clinging to this truth right here. God is in control no matter what. That God will work out all things in life. See, brothers, you meant this for evil. When you sold me into slavery, you meant this for harm, for evil. There was sin inside your heart, but God, he was working and he was purposing and designing the entire event for the salvation of many, so that many people could be alive today. That literally I could come into power in Egypt and feed people from all over the world during this famine. Do you see how God was working? You meant it for evil, but God was still working. He was designing this, leveraging your sin for glory and for good. I love this. God is in control no matter what. This truth he clung to. I imagine that when he was in Potiphar's house and he was a slave, that he reminded himself, God, you're in control of everything, even the bad parts. When he was falsely accused and in prison, he's like, God, I'm trusting that you're still in control. When he was forgotten in prison, he was still like, God, you are in control. I'm just clinging to this truth now. So right now, if you're struggling, you're going through a difficult season of life, maybe you need to hear these words today. God is in control no matter what. They may have meant it for evil. They may have meant it to hurt you, but God, he'll take what is broken and flawed and he will use it for good, that he works all things out for our good and his glory. Now you may say, how in the world does this work itself out in my life? Well, in part 3 of this message, I'm going to show you how exactly this will work itself out in your life and in my life as we go through difficult seasons. So continue to worship with us and join us for part 3 of this message. Well, welcome back to part 3 of this message. As we've seen, Joseph, during the most difficult times in his life, continually clung to truth. And one of the truths that we see him clinging to is that God is in control no matter what. I mean, there he stands 22 years after being betrayed by his brothers, after being sold into slavery. They're standing before him and he goes, hey, you meant this for evil, but guess what? God meant it for good. I'm able to provide food for the world. I'm able to give what is necessary for people to live and survive because of what has happened to me. And so he recognized that God was ruling and reigning in every part of his life, even in the bad moments. So how does this make sense in our life? What's the big so what here? How does it work itself out in your life? Well, first, we need to learn how to lean into God. These are going to be 3 L's. So the first is lean into God. You're just saying, well, what do I mean? See, we're going to have this propensity whenever we go through difficult times that we want to push the idea or we want to push God away. And we're like, God, how in the world could you allow this to happen? I mean, what are you doing? Are you even in control? Or are you even good? We have that propensity to push him away. I'm going to encourage you, if you're going through a difficult season or a difficult season is ahead, that you would actually lean into God. And what you'll find is a few things. The first is you'll find that he comforts you. Unlike anything else, God's ability to grant you comfort, to ultimately give you hope is unparalleled. And you'll know what it's like for your heavenly Father to hold you and to care for you. Also, we know this, that we will learn so much during the difficult seasons. It's in those seasons that it seems like truth is just so raw and real to us. I love what C.S. Lewis says. He says, God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. He's saying, you know, at times our heart, our passion, our learning is not as great during the easy seasons of life. It's during the difficult seasons of life. It's almost like God shouting to us and we can hear him better. We have eyes that see and ears to hear often in the difficult seasons of life. So not only will he comfort you if you lean into him, but he'll teach you. He'll teach you so much. And do you know this, that whenever we go through difficult seasons and hardship, there's opportunity there. I mean, think about it. In a broken world, if you've been betrayed, there's an opportunity to show and express forgiveness and mercy. You know, if we've not been hurt by others, there's no opportunity to offer up forgiveness or mercy. It's only when somebody has hurt us, offended us, betrayed us, that we can actually offer these things that our souls so desperately need. And of course, we need with God himself. It provides opportunity. So I want to encourage you, lean into God in these moments and in these seasons. Number 2, I'm going to encourage you to have the long view of God's faithfulness. I mean, I wonder, it's been 22 years. I wonder how many sleepless nights Joseph had when he goes, I wonder if I'll ever see my father again. I wonder if I ever see my brothers again. I wonder if I'll ever visit my homeland again. I wonder. 22 years. You see this often in scriptures that sometimes God makes a great promise or God is working and the season of hardship is extended. Often we want God to work on our timetable, in our ways, and we're like, all right, God, all right, it's been a few days now that we've been quarantined. I'm ready to get out of the house. God, I've been going through this difficult season for a long time, and God, would you please do something? I mean, Joseph, it was off and on hardship for 22 years. And so you know what we do? We patiently wait on the Lord to reveal his redemptive plans. You know, part of the Christian faith is we wait. We have this already, but not yet. That we've been given Jesus, that our lives and our hearts and our souls have been completely and radically transformed because of the good news of Jesus. And yet we wait for him to come and bring back and make all things right. Bring his kingdom to earth. Lord, your kingdom come, your will be done, because we know it's not fully consummated yet. but in the future it will. So we have the long view of God's faithfulness, not the short-sighted, God, I need you to do this right now, the long view that no, God, ultimately you will make all things right. Joseph, he trusted this. Even in the bad seasons, 22 years of hardship, he still goes, I know my God was working out something. I knew he was up to something great. Number 3, so what? Well, we need a living hope. Hope is one of these ingredients that we so desperately need in a fallen and broken world. If there's no light at the end of the tunnel, can you imagine how dark our souls and how dark our hearts would be? If we didn't have a hope that one day God was going to make all things right. No. We do. We have that in Jesus. We have this living hope. It's not a stale hope. It's not a dead hope. It is a living hope that he is going to make all things right one day. That we cling to this truth that God, you're in control of everything, and one day you will set everything right. Every wrong will be made right. Your kingdom will be fully and completely realized. I just want to share with you for a moment how God takes the mess of us and man and gives us incredible hope. See, you and I, we have sinned against God. We have rebelled against our Creator. Every single one of us, doesn't matter who you are, we've all rebelled against our Creator. And so what is he to do, right? I mean, there's this difficult situation in which we have run from him, and he's perfect and holy. We've left his home. What in the world is God to do? So here we have Jesus. And I love, because we read in the scriptures that man killed him. That Pontius Pilate, that the scribes and the Pharisees, I mean, they ultimately, Roman soldiers, they killed Jesus. And yet God's hand and purposes were not thwarted. That God's hand was all over that. That he was designing this moment to what? To bring us salvation. Do you see that they meant it for evil? They meant to kill Jesus, and yet God meant it for good to offer us salvation, just like Joseph. See, Joseph is just a foreshadowing of Jesus. That his brothers meant it for evil, they sold him off, and yet God meant it for good. That God brought him into power so what? He could provide for the entire world. And Jesus, he was killed on a cross in our place for our sin. Man meant it for evil. And then what does God do? God uses it to offer salvation to the world. I mean, what great hope that we have, that God is in control of everything. If you've never trusted Jesus, I pray that today is the day you go, all right, I'm going to release this illusion of control that I have, and I'm going to trust in you, that God, you're in control. You're ruling and reigning in every sense of the word. And today you trust Jesus. And if you're a believer in Jesus, I'm going to encourage you, lean into him now. I'm going to encourage you to learn and understand what God is doing in your life. I'm going to encourage you to trust in this living hope that we have nothing greater than Jesus himself, our living hope. And one day he will set all things right because we have this long view of God's faithfulness. Love you guys. Continue to worship with us, and I will see you next Sunday.